The female reproductive system is regulated by a number of hormones. Some of these are the same as the hormones that we saw in the male reproductive system. We start with gonadotropin-releasing hormone. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone is released by the hypothalamus in the brain, where it goes to the anterior pituitary gland and stimulates the release of luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone, the same as we saw in men. Where we see more difference is in the functions of the luteinizing hormone and the follicle-stimulating hormone. In women, follicle-stimulating hormone stimulates the development of the ovarian follicles. So remember, a follicle has to form around an ovum before that ovum will be able to ovulate. Follicle-stimulating hormone stimulates the development of the follicles around the ovum. Follicle-stimulating hormone stimulates the granulosa cells around the oocyte to produce estrogens, which we'll see more about in just a minute. Luteinizing hormone in women is important for the actual process of ovulation. A spike in luteinizing hormone is what triggers the process of ovulation to release the oocyte. Estrogen is actually a number of different compounds. It's more correctly spoken of as being estrogens. There's estradiol, estriol, and esterone. These are all estrogens, very similar sorts of molecules, very similar functions. The estrogens are produced by the developing follicle and also by the adrenal cortex, by the adrenal gland sitting on top of the kidneys. In a woman, the estrogen that she needs comes largely from those follicles, but in men who don't have developing ovarian follicles, they still need a small amount of estrogen, and that estrogen is going to be produced by the adrenal cortex. This is also the source of estrogen in postmenopausal women. When they're no longer ovulating, there aren't ovarian follicles to produce the estrogen. The estrogen has to come from the adrenal cortex. Estrogen has many functions, one of which is the growth of the ovaries and the development of the secondary sex organs. So a baby girl's organs develop properly only if they have estrogen available. Estrogen is also important for the development of the secondary sex characteristics. These are the things that we associate with feminism, with an adult female. These would include things like the growth of body hair in the armpits, the axillary region, and in the pubic region. It includes the development of the breasts, where fat is deposited in the chest wall to create the shape of the breasts. Increase fat in the thighs and the hips is also an effect of estrogen. It's actually important for women to have a higher percentage of body fat than men. Why do you think it's important that a woman has so much more fat than a man? It all comes down to giving birth. It takes an incredible amount of energy for a woman's body to be able to carry a pregnancy to term. And that energy comes from the woman's body itself if she's not eating enough calories to make up the difference. And so a woman who has very low reserves of body fat is very unlikely to be able to carry a pregnancy to term. In fact, women who get down to a very low level of body fat often stop menstruating. It's because the body has detected that there aren't enough resources in the body to carry a pregnancy to term, so it stops ovulating so that you don't get pregnant. Estrogen also stimulates bone development. You get bone development, bone growth, and bone reconstruction. So we see things like the widening of the hips, that spreading of the pelvis that's important to be able to actually get a baby through the pelvic inlet. The other really important reproductive hormone I want you to know about for women is progesterone. Progesterone, remember, is made by the corpus luteum, the remains of the follicle that are left in the ovary after the ovulation. In a pregnant woman, large amounts of progesterone are made by the placenta as well. Progesterone is known as the pregnancy hormone because all of its effects are geared towards maintaining a pregnancy. Some of the effects of progesterone include changing the lining of the uterus to make it thicker and more nutrient-rich to prepare for implantation. That way, if there was a pregnancy achieved, that fertilized egg has a very nutrient-rich environment to implant it inside the uterus. Progesterone also stimulates the development of the mammary glands, or the actual glandular tissue in the breasts that will eventually produce milk. It's also important for the development of the placenta, and then once the placenta is developed, the placenta can take over and produce large amounts of progesterone. Another really important function of progesterone is that it suppresses the release of FSH and LH. Now remember that FSH and LH are important for follicle development and ovulation. If you're pregnant, do you want to be developing follicles and ovulating? Not likely. It's not a good idea to ovulate if you're already pregnant. So the high levels of progesterone caused by a pregnancy will suppress FSH and LH so that you don't develop additional ova once a pregnancy's been achieved.